Hi, I'm Jamie from CEP, and I manage our voter outreach initiative called Climate and Energy Voters Take Action. We're hosting this series called CEP Votes as a way to share the great work that CEP staff are doing and how it relates to voting and civic engagement. We've now interviewed Beth Polly on utility shutoffs and Dorothy Barnett on wind development. You can catch these two previous interviews on CEP's YouTube channel, which is in the chat, or you can search CEP Heartland on YouTube and find our channel that way. The video archives are also here on Facebook, on our Facebook page. Now I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle and I'm an intern with the Climate and Energy Project. I work with Jamie on the Climate and Energy Voters Take Action initiative. And today we're interviewing Rachel Myslivy, CEP's Assistant Director, to have her tell our listeners a little bit about her work with the connections between climate and health and how voting impacts this issue. Thank you for joining us today, Rachel.
Hi, thanks for having me today on CEP Votes. I'm always happy to discuss the impacts of climate change on public health.
All right. If our listeners have any questions during this feature about climate and health or about voting in Kansas, feel free to drop them in the comment box. So Rachel, can you fill us in a little on your work you're doing at CEP connecting climate and public health?
Yeah, definitely. It's been on my mind a lot lately. I was fortunate to be accepted into the Yale School of Public Health, Climate Change and Health Certificate Program this year. So every week I've been digging into climate and health impacts and then discussing the issues with a group of fellow students. It's been so inspiring to learn with medical professionals like doctors and nurses. And one of my peers even works with the Centers for Disease Control. So it sort of feels like I'm learning with like movie stars. It's really great learning from them, but it's also really exciting to me to see the public health community so engaged with climate change. So they've taught this course for several years, but apparently this year they had overwhelming numbers of applicants. They had almost 800 people apply for 100 spots. And Kansas is really fortunate that we have two participants, myself and a family practice doctor from Holton. And so as part of that coursework, I've been working on an article highlighting the top 3 climate and health concerns in Kansas. So briefly, that would be increased temperatures, increased precipitation, and extreme weather, all of which will contribute to increased asthma and allergies, vector-borne diseases, respiratory and cardiovascular conditions, and mental health impacts. And so at CEP, we are committed to helping people understand climate and energy issues in a way that compels them towards effective advocacy. So it's no different with climate change and public health. Along with our Kansas Wealth partners, we put out the Kansas Climate and Health Declaration, which clearly outlines the issues along with ways that you can get involved in climate action. So you can read and sign the declaration online at resilientkansas.org. And I'm sure Michelle's going to drop that in the chat. So while I'm really interested in the connections between climate change and public health, I recognize that it can be challenging and overwhelming at times. But I really feel like educating yourself is the best way to manage that overwhelm. So you don't have to be an expert to engage in climate change as a public health concern. You can pick a topic that's interesting to you and then learn what you can about it, think about it, reflect on how it impacts you, your life, your loved ones, your community, and then consider what you can do about it. Then you can either take action on that piece of it, or you can move on to the next thing if you're not really excited about that first step. But what's really important is that you keep learning, that you try to build a community around yourself to help you manage that overwhelm, and then keep working for that healthy and resilient Kansas that we all want. And again, the Climate and Energy Project, we are always here and happy to discuss these issues with you. I've also spent a lot of time writing grants lately and trying to get funding together to increase our outreach on climate change as a public health concern. And we have some big ideas about this, as we always do have big ideas, but we really want to hear from you, from our network, from the climate and energy community in Kansas. Let us know what we can do to help you better understand and engage with climate change as a public health concern. We are all ears.
Great, thank you so much for sharing, Rachel. And can you talk a little bit more about how voting affects the issue that you're working on?
Yes, I would say climate change is always on the ballot. There are so many things that we can do to slow down this runaway train called climate change, and effective policy solutions are critical. So you get effective climate and energy policies by voting for candidates who want to learn more, who use science-based information to guide their decisions, and who are committed to a healthy and resilient future. Climate change and public health are not partisan issues, so don't make it about party, make it about progress and what we need to do to safeguard the future of our state. I also like to say that we need climate action from the president to the PTA. And I know that election day is just around the corner, and I hope everyone either has already voted or will vote between now and Tuesday. But I think it's really important to emphasize that we can take action every single day on climate. National and local elections are huge, but you can also make a difference by advocating for energy efficient lighting at your child's school or in your congregation. There are a million different ways to engage in climate action, and we really encourage you to do what you can where you are. So to that point, don't stop after election day. Think about what you can do in your neighborhood, in your community, in your everyday life. And if you need a little bit of help, CEP offers scholarships to emerging leaders, environmental leaders, to attend the Kansas Kansas Leadership Center to really step up your leadership game. And all trainings are virtual, so you can invest in yourself as a climate leader from the comfort of your own home. So tune in to CEP Votes next week with Leilani Gray to learn about this unique leadership opportunity. And I think it's important to note that a few of the people who have participated, who have gotten scholarships to attend the Leadership Center from the Climate Energy Project, they've ended up deciding to run for office after the training. And so maybe that's in your future. Reach out to us if you're interested in Cal trainings, or send a note if you want a thought partner on how you can get more engaged. Again, we are here for you, and we love talking about these issues all day, every day.
That's right. With that, I'd like to check to see if there are any questions. Michelle, have you seen any questions come through on Facebook?
No questions on Facebook.
Okay. All right. Well, I have one for Rachel. If I wanted to ask a candidate a question about climate change as a public health crisis, as a way to both educate that candidate and also learn where they stand on that issue, how might I have that conversation?
That's a great question, Jamie. And I would say that the best conversations about climate change are ones that encourage dialogue. So in other words, it's not a great idea to start a conversation planning to prove someone wrong. And I would try to encourage people to be curious and thoughtful instead of confrontational and dismissive. I think it's always important to be genuine when engaging in difficult conversations, and climate conversations can be difficult. So to that point, I would really encourage you to think about what about climate change is most concerning to you. What do you care about the most? How is that impacted by climate change? And what public health concerns are close to your heart? So you could always start with a really straightforward question like, how does climate science inform your decision making? Or if you're really passionate about renewables, for example, as a climate solution, you could ask, how do you intend to grow renewable energy in Kansas if you're elected? Of course, you can always take a more personal route. So for example, I have asthma and allergies. And after reading and signing the Kansas Climate and Health Declaration at resilientkansas.org, I know that asthma and allergies are getting worse as temperatures increase. So I might ask a question along the lines of, as someone who suffers from asthma and allergies, I'm concerned about the impacts of climate change on my respiratory health. What actions do you think are most important to address climate change as a public health crisis? Or say you're concerned about extreme temperatures and the way they might impact your grandma, who is more at risk of heat-related stress. So in Kansas, 8% of Kansans over 65 years of age live in poverty, and many of our elders struggle to make ends meet. Kansas also has the highest electricity rates in the region, and no hot weather rule to make sure that the electricity isn't cut off during the hot summer months. So a lot of seniors in Kansas find themselves in the tough situation of deciding, do I pay for air conditioning or for my medications? So to that point, you could say, every summer I'm concerned about how my grandma is going to stay cool when she can't afford to pay her high electricity bill. Kansas temperatures are increasing, and our older neighbors are at a greater risk of heat-related illness and death. What are your plans to make sure that our seniors are protected from energy shutoffs during hot weather, since Kansas doesn't have a hot weather rule? But honestly, I think the best questions come from lived experience. So read the Climate and Health Declaration and sign it, and think about how climate change impacts you or your loved ones, and then start thinking about the questions that you want to have answered. Those will be the best questions you can ask. And of course, CEP is always here if you want to run some ideas by us. We also host workshops on how to start a climate conversation. If this is interesting to you, just reach out to us at takeaction@climateandenergy.org. While we can't take our show on the road like we used to because of COVID, we can certainly take our show to Zoom. And we love engaging with civic groups, faith communities, really anyone who's interested in learning more. So reach out to us and we'll come to your living room virtually.
Thank you for sharing all that really great information, Rachel. And is there a piece of instructional advice that you would offer someone who has yet to vote?
Sure. Well, like I said before, I have some respiratory issues that put me at a higher risk of bad outcomes if I get COVID. So I'm super careful and I'm not taking any unnecessary risks. Thankfully, Kansas has voting by mail and advanced voting, which is great for people like me. And yes, I'll miss the experience of voting in person, but my safety is more important and voting is non-negotiable for me. So when I was trying to figure out what to do, I also was a little nervous about putting my vote or my ballot in the mail. I really wanted to make sure my vote would be counted in a timely manner. So I had already requested an advanced ballot and I decided to take it and drop it off at the local ballot box in Oskaloosa, the county seat where I vote. I wasn't really sure where to take my ballot, but an easy call to the courthouse answered my question in just a few minutes. And I was very pleased to see that they had a drop box outdoors and one inside. And I chose to put mine in the outdoor box and then went home. And the next day I checked myvoteinfo.voteks.org to make sure that my vote was counted. And then I called it good. While I was out dropping off my advanced ballot, I was reminded that in Kansas, you can also vote in person early. And I saw several elderly Kansans voting early, and I thought that was just a really great idea for people who are maybe more vulnerable to infections or who might have a hard time getting off work on election day. So you can go anytime between now and Monday at noon. So you could get off of this webinar with us and zip right down to your election office and vote. I will say that the hours may be different based on where you live. So make sure you call your county election office, or you could do like I did and just call your courthouse and ask them to help you and somebody will get you to the right place. You can also check ksballot.org for early voting locations, and Michelle's going to drop that link in the comments. I think what's most important though is really voting is our duty and our privilege. And in Kansas, we're lucky that we have lots of ways to vote. So however you do it, get out and vote.
Thank you for that great list of advice and a very succinct way to not only drop off your ballot, but also make sure that it has been counted. Michelle, if you could also drop that link in the, excuse me, that link in the chat that she mentioned, myvoteinfo.voteks.org. So it's also important to remind everyone that this election season in particular is going to be very different than previous elections. And that's due to the coronavirus. More people are voting by mail and election officials are working with reduced staff. So in some states, they can't start counting advanced ballots until after the polls close on election night. It may take even longer than it has in the past to count all of these votes that are coming in and verify a clear winner. It could take days, weeks, or longer. In order to protect democracy, we need to support counting every vote. We're encouraging folks to prepare themselves for a longer than usual process and encourage their network to fully support counting every vote. If you are using Twitter or social media, you can use the hashtag #CountEveryVote if you want to make a comment about this. So again, we want to check to see as we're getting closer to the end here. Michelle, are there any questions coming in?
We just have a comment from Scott White, who is actually one of our voter ambassadors. And
Yeah.
he said, at my courthouse in Douglas County, Kansas, the lines were very short for early voting last week. It was a 5-minute experience. So
Okay.
really good for people who want to go and vote early before election day.
That's great. And that also reminds me to just remind everyone that's listening, if you have an advanced ballot, you do want to vote with that ballot and do the method that that Rachel did and take that ballot to your county election office to drop it off in the proper box rather than dropping it in the mail, just due to the timeline that we're on right now. We're on a very tight timeline. And if you don't have an advanced ballot, then you can, of course, go and vote early. If you have an advanced ballot and still want to go vote early, you can still do that. You'll just be given a provisional ballot at the election office. Okay, so at CEP, we believe in strong civic engagement to help move Kansas toward a clean energy future. And we want to ensure that all of you have accurate and timely information about voting. That's why we're doing this, this webinar series. We hope you learned a great deal today about the connections between climate and health, and are even more motivated now to get out the climate energy vote. We're getting toward the end of our live program here, but before we go, Michelle's going to tell us a little bit more about the initiative that we launched this year.
Thank you, Jamie. So the Climate and Energy Project has been turning out more environmental voters in Kansas with our Climate and Energy Voters Take Action initiative. We have a 36-person voter team that has collectively contacted 382 voters. And all throughout the election season, we've been sharing important voter information, and we look forward to continuing to engage after the election. So if you would like to learn more, drop us an email at takeaction@climateandenergy.org or visit our webpage, and I'll be sure to drop that in the chat for you guys.
Okay, so thank you, Rachel, so much for being on today. And thank you all of you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to still drop them in the comment box, even if you've listened to this as a recording, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible with a response. You can also email questions to us at takeaction@climateandenergy.org, and that's the link that Michelle is dropping in the chat. And Rachel mentioned this earlier, that that the election, or actually this initiative, does not end with this election. And so in that spirit, we are continuing CEP Votes even after the election. So we're going to do our last one on November 6th, and we're going to feature Leilani Gray, who's going to talk to us about the program that Rachel mentioned earlier, Kansas Environmental Leadership. So you can tune in on Friday, November 6th at noon. And thank you all for helping us transition to a clean energy future.